Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the Harley Drain Court of Revision. It is February 27th at 4:30 p.m. and we are going to get going. First item on the agenda, noting that the attendance has been taken and all members of the court are here, is that we are looking for the appointment of a chair. So I am just looking for any nominations. Councillor Coleman.
Councillor Garneau.
Councillor Garneau, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I will.
Are there any other nominations? Councillor Miller?
I'll move that nominations be closed.
Okay, so motion is that nominations be closed and that Councillor Garneau be appointed chair. May I have a seconder? Councillor Coleman? All those in favor? Carried. Councillor Garneau, you have the chair.
All right, thank you, everyone. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Coleman, seconded by Councillor Miller. All those in favor of approval of the agenda? Thanks. Declaration of pecuniary interests, if any. If anyone has one to declare, they can declare it now or as it arises during the meeting. Next, we're going to ask whether there are any late appeals to be filed orally at the meeting. So I'll ask, are there any members of the public that wish to make an appeal who haven't already indicated? Thank you, sir. All right, so. Oh, sorry, and could I get your name, please? All right, and Mr. Peters, your address, please. All right, and are there any other members of the public who wish to make an appeal? Yes, sir. Yeah. And your address, please, Mr. Taylor. All right, and any other members of the public? All right. So then we will need a motion of the court to accept the late appeals. Councillor Miller, Councillor Coleman, all those in favor of accepting the appeals? Thank you. All right. So we are going to call upon our general manager, Rob Walton, to discuss. Oh, excuse me, sorry. We do need a motion first to receive the communication items on the agenda, 6.1. Councillor Coleman, Councillor Miller, is there any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Miller, sorry.
Just in regards to 6.2, there's some proposed changes in that original engineer's report. And I'm just wondering, would we need a motion to accept those changes?
We will. We'll deal with that one separately. Okay. So on 6.1, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of receiving the communication? Thank you. So now we'll turn things over to Mr. Walton to discuss the changes, and then we will be looking for a motion.
So, my understanding is that after the report was filed, there were members of the assessed residents which brought forward a couple of issues with the assessments in the drain. And the engineers have put forward a proposal which actually has been circulated to the affected owners, which proposes some changes to the report, which the Court of Revision, if they choose to, can amend the bylaw to recognize. And the engineers here, if we want to ask any further questions, but that's the generality of that. I don't believe there's been any, these were sent out to the affected owners, and I don't believe that there's been any issues on what was submitted, and I don't believe there's anyone here to talk about that issue. Is that correct? Of the members of the watershed? Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. How do we want to proceed? Councillor Miller?
Madam Chair, I'm just wondering, at what point would we actually hear the oral appeals?
I'll defer to the clerk on that one.
Through Councillor Garneau to yourself, Councillor Miller. So we have one written appeal, which would be 7-1. The other two that were filed verbally will be considered as 7-2 and 7-3.
Okay, that's all I need to know. As far as 6-2, did you want a motion? We could introduce a motion now, maybe, to accept those changes. So I'll move that the proposed changes by R.J. Burnside and Associates be incorporated into the report, and that we amend the bylaw. I move that we amend the bylaw to incorporate those proposed changes.
Thank you. We have a seconder in Councillor Coleman. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? So that carries. All right, so that does take us to our appeals. So we are going to begin with Robert Hughes, 164 Harley Road. So how this will work for each of the appeals is that the engineer will have an opportunity to give evidence. The appellant will have a chance to present their case. The engineer will have an opportunity to respond, and then the court will retreat to deliberate on the appeal. So if I could ask the engineer to come up. This is with regards to 164 Harley Road, please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and the Court of Revision. My name is Paul McIntyre. I'm the drainage engineer for the Harley Municipal Drain. I did have a two-page PowerPoint that is up here right now. The first page was the proposed amendments, and that has already been dealt with. The second page of our proposal is the response to Mr. Hughes. So Mr. Hughes has appealed the drainage report, and he has put in basically a 4-section appeal dealing with different things. The first section of his appeal actually deals with my authority to make my assessments of the cost of this drainage works to the drain. And I'm just going to quote here a section of the Drainage Act. It's section 11. It's the duties of the engineer. In the Drainage Act, section 11, the engineer shall, to the best of his skill, knowledge, judgment, and ability, honestly and faithfully, and without fear of, favor, or prejudice against any person, perform the duties assigned to him in connection with any drainage works and make a true report. So in this case, I have used my skill, my knowledge, and my judgment to put together the assessments that you have before you today. And that is my response to the first section of Mr. Hughes' appeal. The second section of Mr. Hughes' appeal deals with the use of his land. He has a Ducks Unlimited agreement, and he has an Ontario tax rebate on his land because it is a wetland. So in our report, we have factored Mr. Hughes' land to 1/2 that of what we would have for agricultural land, and that is all I can say on that particular part of his appeal. Excuse me. The third part of his appeal is Mr. Hughes has said that he's not actually within the watershed of the Harley Municipal Drain. So if we look at the plan that we have up on the PowerPoint right now, this is a section of the drain where Mr. Hughes' property is located. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner of that, Mr. Hughes' property is just above Harley Road. And Mr. Hughes' property outlets across Harley Road through a culvert when the water gets high enough in his property, and drains down through the Verhey property and into the Clement property. We've already had a discussion with Mr. Clement that when the water is flowing through his property at normal rates, the water flows to the west directly into the Harley Drain. if the water in his property is at high levels, that high level will bypass and will flow south into Big Creek. But through normal events, all the water within that section of the watershed goes into the Harley Drain. The fourth part of Mr. Hughes's appeal deals with the cost of the drain and who should pay for it. Mr. Hughes is suggesting that the provincial government make a contribution to rural drainage. I don't have any comment towards that section of Mr. Hughes' appeal. That is my presentation.
Thank you. And if you just want to stand by to respond to anything that the appellant might raise in his remarks, we'll call on. Oh, sorry. I should ask if there's any questions, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, a couple questions to Mr. McIntyre. Or maybe it's to Rob. What does the province pay now for agricultural land? Is it a third for the works through the grant process?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, in Southern Ontario, the grant is 1/3 of the cost of drainage works and of maintenance works as well.
Okay, yeah, third. Okay, so I was right
For agricultural properties only.
Yeah. Now, my second question, whether you or to Mr. McIntyre, given that Mr. Hughes' land is, would it be considered agriculture even though it's used by Ducks Unlimited? Would it still be eligible for that 1/3 grant? I'd be interested to know.
That is a good question, because that property will have had a provincial rating put on it because it's Ducks Unlimited. So the agricultural properties, if they qualify for the agricultural tax rebate program, they get the 1/3 grant. If they're not, they don't. So I believe that property will get tax credits other ways than through the Drainage Act.
Okay. So we don't.
There are managed forest properties. They get different. They're treated differently through the land tax system, and I believe they don't get treated as agricultural lands the same as a property that is farmed.
Okay, so Mr. Hughes' land that is dedicated, we don't think will be eligible for that 1/3 provincial agricultural land rebate from the province. But then, in your presentation, Mr. McIntyre, you said that Mr. Hughes' land is factored into half of that of agricultural land. Can you just expand on that? Because I'm not quite sure what you meant by that.
Okay, so through the chair, the way that we design drains is we look at individual properties and how the water sheds off of those properties. So if you had a road that is mostly asphalt, it's more the water sheds off it faster. So we factor those up. If you have land that's bushland, or in this case swampland, the water is retained, so we factor those down. So we basically do our design based on what we feel is the outlet rate, the rate of flow leaving that property, and his would be lower than his neighbors. Basically.
Okay, yeah, okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And again, through you, Madam Chair, and because he retains a lot of the water for the ducks, and for the natural heritage and all that, our natural features of the land. So if you factored half of that of agricultural land, then his costs would be half if it were considered agriculture. Is that correct?
That is correct for the maintenance work. So yes. What we're looking at here is just the cost of building this report, which is a paper exercise. Yeah. When it comes to the actual maintenance work done by your drainage superintendent, his land would be looked at half a rate of the neighbors in the cost sharing of the actual physical construction.
Okay, and last question, Madam Chair. The 50%, is that, where did you get that number from? Is that a standard in the drainage business, or is that just something that you did calculations for and measured the drainage? Where'd you get that 50% number?
So through the chair, that 50% is based on my 38 years of working within the drainage industry, and that's my skill, my knowledge, and other engineers use that number too. I don't know if I've ever gone around and done a straw poll, but we all factor the land. We all look at it, and we calculate a rate of flow off of lands based on factors, whether it's up or down from agricultural.
Okay, thank you for the answers.
Yeah, wonder. The drainage superintendent looks like she'd like to add something to that.
Through you, Madam Chair. I just looked up on agricultural ag maps, which is an OMAFRA website that shows the farm property class tax rated parcels, and his property is eligible for the 1/3 grant when it comes to maintenance projects in the future. As long as he retains that farm tax status, he will be eligible and the county will apply for that grant on his behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Appreciate that.
Are there further questions for the engineer? All right, seeing none, then we will invite Mr. Hughes up to speak, please.
So thank you for having me. First of all, I'd like to say I don't have farm status, so that wouldn't apply to me. And secondly, I don't believe I stated that I'm outside of the watershed. I realize I'm inside the watershed. That's quite plain, so I don't think I stated that. But as it's been said, I do have a wetlands project on my place with Ducks Unlimited. And I had a question for the engineer before I start. And that would be, what's the agricultural equivalency factor? I'd like to know that before I proceed, if I could.
Mr. Walton, do you have that, or are we? Are we okay to have the question answered before we proceed? Thank you.
So like I explained to the councillors, we take 1 hectare of agricultural land, we call that our base unit of calculation, and we factor other lands up or down based on that 1 acre, 1 hectare. So we usually take woodlots, ponds, wetlands factored down. Half of the runoff rate that we'd have off an agricultural land, we would expect to come off of wetlands or woodlots. If it's a residential property that has a lot of roof area and driveway and stuff, we'd factor it up maybe 2 times what the agricultural land would have. So that's the equivalency. We start with a base unit of 1 hectare of agricultural land and factor everything up or down. Okay.
So I'd like to present the fact that the wetland that I've owned now for nearly 35 years has been drained by way of a natural stream that runs over under the Harley Road, south towards Big Creek through the Clement property, as been stated. However, I have to dispute the fact that it runs into the Harley drain. I too have been speaking to Mr. Clement, and his statements were quite contrary to the ones that I just heard. I think the stream that my wetland runs into is a natural waterway, and it probably predates the Harley drain. So I think it's been running into Big Creek for a lot longer than the Harley drain's been there. So I kind of have to contest the fact that the drainage from my wetland uses the Harley drain whatsoever. And addition to that, I'd like to well, I'm going to skip that one. I'd like to go to the assessment rationale portion of the report. I believe it's page 8. So if we go to that, so it's page 8, section 4.3. And I don't know whether you'd want me to read this or not, but it says lands and roads use drainage works as an outlet, for which when the drainage works is constructed or improved, an improved outlet is provided either directly or indirectly through the medium of any drainage works, a swale, ravine, creek, watercourse may be assessed for outlet liability. Then it goes on as part of subsection 3 that states, the assessment in subsection 1 shall be based upon the volume rate of flow of the water artificially caused to flow into the drainage works. So I have to say that there's nothing artificially injected into the Harley drain from my property. It's all natural. It's been natural for years, and therefore I don't think the assessment is correct in this report. So that's the first part of my concerns. The second part of my concerns is in regards to the distribution of the cost of this report. At a previous council meeting, I asked the question, how did someone arrive at $420 per land parcel? And I believe the answer was that was what the engineer determined the fairest way to do it. With all respect to the engineer, fairness for one person is much different than fairness for another person. So one person's definition of fairness varies greatly from the definition that somebody else has, as in the fact that I don't think the way it was done is fair. I think a mathematical formula somewhat similar to the way the work was distributed would be more fair, as per percentage of the land owned. Like, I just don't think it's fair that a person that owns half a hectare is charged the same as somebody that owns 100 hectares for this report. So that's the second part of my concern. And that concludes it.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Are there any questions from the members of the court? All right, seeing none, thank you. Would the engineer like to respond to anything that the appellant raised?
So through you, Madam Chair, I think I described the two sections that Mr. Hughes had just reiterated here. I believe that he is within the watershed, or his property is within the watershed. And we talked about Mr. Clement's property. We did talk to Mr. Clement. He did not appeal this drain. He believes he's in the watershed. Mr. Hughes' water goes through Mr. Clement's property to get to the Harley drain. So I can't argue any more on that topic. And the other topics about the opinion of the engineer, that's why the Drainage Act is actually set up the way it is, so that one person is actually put in that position to be fair and impartial and come up with these assessments. And as Mr. Hughes definitely said, there will be, in this case, 81 different opinions as to how that money should be divided up, but the Drainage Act puts that responsibility upon me, and I've decided that's how I think it should be done. I think it's fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions from the court? All right, seeing none, I wonder if the clerk could just speak to next steps for us, please.
Yes, through Chair Garneau to the court. So what would happen next would be we would move on to Appeal 7-2, then Appeal 7-3, at which point, once all of the appeals have been heard, the court will convene in the other room to deliberate decisions, and then you'll come back.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're not going to step. Just take their appeals first.
Thank you. Yes, so because we do have oral appeals today at the meeting, we're going to proceed a little bit differently for the next two. So in this case, we will ask the appellant to come forward first and to state their case, and then we'll offer the engineer an opportunity to respond because he isn't able to speak preemptively to an appeal that he may not yet know the substance of. So with that in mind, we'll ask Mr. Peters to come up, please. And Mr. Peters, if I could ask you to spell your name for the clerk, please, and repeat your address, please.
It's Hubertus, Hubertus. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for letting me speak here. I didn't realize we had to formally put in a request. I do want to comment that this drain has been about 25 years since it's been last done, and it really needs to be done. I'm glad it's being done. It's about time it's being done. My concern with this plan is that the amount of acres or hectares are being assessed to our properties. I've looked at my own property, and I've looked at the two neighbors, and I'm under the assumption that at one point, when I bought this farm from my father, I was assuming it was a 100-acre farm. I'm being allotted just under 104 acres under this plan, and yet there's a 3/4 acres of a lot that was severed off a few years ago as well. So technically I've got just over 99 acres in my opinion. But I've looked at the neighbors to the east of me, and they are also over 100 acres when you do the math. So if perhaps everybody's being overvalued on their acreage, then it's all equidistant for being charged when the work is done, then I don't really have a problem with it, but I still question why the acreage is off. So that's my only concern that I have. So.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Are there questions from the court? All right, Councillor Miller.
Just, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Rudy. Rudy, you think you got less than 100 acres. Have you ever had it surveyed at one time or recently? Or?
To be honest, no. That's why I'm being quite frank about it. I was always assumed those were 100-acre parcels. And I'm sure on my deed that I own, it probably said originally I had 100 acres. Now it's the last 3/4 of an acre that my daughter has severed off. So I'm thinking legally I have 99.25 acres. So when I do the math, I'm just under 104 acres, closer to 104 than actually 103.5. So we're only talking pennies here, but still, if everybody's being overcharged, it may not be correct. I'm just questioning how they come up with a formula.
Okay, like I said, I just wanted to see if you had something on paper. Okay, thank you.
You're good. Mr. Peters, can I ask your lot and concession number? Staff are going to look up on our.
Oh, that's a good one. Lot 16, lot 7 concession, or I think it's lot 16.
Session 7.
Concession 7, lot 16.
Everyone can go on if they're doing it.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. So Mr. Walton's going to see if we can get an answer
Yeah.
with what's on file.
Yeah, I trust Rob.
So,
Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. Yeah, I should.
and with that in mind, I just want to make sure we're correct on the record. You're on the 7th or the 8th concession?
7th concession. My laneway's on the 8th.
On the laneway's on the 8th. That's what I thought. Okay, perfect. All right. So thank you. We'll ask the engineer to speak next, please.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Shannon Tweedle to come up and try to address this issue.
Through you, Madam Chair. I did speak with Rudy on the phone sometime in January about this issue, and he brought it to my attention. When I looked at the information that the county had sent to the engineer, it looked as though there was an issue with the GIS department and how they were taking the information off of our server. So instead of taking the MPAC areas that are listed for each property in MPAC, they were scaling off the areas from the GIS parcel fabric. So that's where the discrepancy in the areas has come from. So there is a discrepancy for every single property within this watershed. Some of them are an acre or two, and others are just a fraction of an acre. So the actual MPAC information was not properly provided to the engineer.
Thank you, and I think Mr. Walton's going to build on that.
Through the chair to committee too, I was recently looking up something actually on the Oxford County equivalent of RGIS too, and there's a notice on there too where the impact information isn't available on there anymore too. So I don't know what's happened with the impact information and our ability to put on GIS, but there has recently been some change that because you used to be able to get accurate information off all this and you can't anymore. So I'll confirm that that's happened in other jurisdictions too. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for the engineer or staff? Councillor Coleman?
In light of what Shannon just started, will this be all reevaluated now for every property?
Through you, Madam Chair. There were no proposals to update every single area within the watershed, but if that's what the court decides, that's what you can direct the engineer to reevaluate the entire watershed.
Through the chair to the committee, as you've heard here, this is the way that the information is on here too, and I think the overall inaccuracies wouldn't warrant a rejig of it unless people came up and said that they were wildly, there's a wild mistake in this. So if everybody was out, say 4% as for Rudy's properties, and everybody's out 4%, if we change it all, it's going to be the same at the end anyways. And maybe some of them are 2 or 3% and some are 5. I don't think that that's worthwhile to make the changes. We did spend 50-some thousand on this report, so to spend another 20,000 to correct a mistake that really doesn't change anything, And what we're doing here is changing the maintenance schedules from the original report, which bring it into a more of today's how everything is out there. I think in all that it should be quite acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from committee? The court, sorry. All right. Seeing none, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, how do we fix this going forward? Maybe that's not for us to decide, but
I can answer that. So, through the chair to Councillor Miller, or Quarter Revision member Miller, I guess it is tonight. I think we'll look into this a little bit more diligently for all we're doing for all the reports and just see what the impact is on others. I think that we certainly want the accurate information in there, and we'll look into what the data issue is. On this one, it's a large watershed with a lot of properties. Certainly, any changes would be big. Most watersheds for most of our drains are not this big, and we should be able to get that impact information and actually have the accurate information in there. So we'll definitely, as staff, look into this.
okay, I appreciate that. You say to yourself, at what point does an error or potential error become material? Maybe 1%. You could argue not, but I think when you get 4 or 5%, yeah, it definitely needs to be fixed. Okay.
Yeah, so I think we'll discuss further when we deliberate on the files at hand. With that in mind,
If I could just add, it won't change that overall $54,000 divided amongst the watershed. It will not change that $420 per each individual owner. It may change the assessment for future maintenance, and it'll be very small percentages that we're talking about because it is that big watershed. And when you divide up those numbers, it'll be very, very small differences.
Thank you. All right, so our next appeal is from Mr. Taylor. We'll have him come up and state his case, and if you could just repeat your name and address for the clerk, please. Thank you. And
Okay.
your address, please, sir.
Pardon?
Your address, please.
71 Stage Road, Burford.
No, go ahead.
On this map of the Harley Drain, I got a farm located 6 concession lot 19 and 20. And they're showing corner off the lot 19 as being in the Harley drained area. And I've drained that land before, and it does not drain towards the Harley drain. It drains west and east to the drain that runs through the farm.
Thank you. Are there questions for the appellant? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Three to James. James, sorry, you said that your lot 19 on the 6th concession drains where? It drains west, and which other way?
That land from the road drains west and then north to the drain that runs, natural drain that runs through the farm and across this road.
All right, thank you.
Are there further questions for the appellant? If you're looking for the drawing, it's the top left corner of the drawing. We're okay to proceed? All right, so we'll ask the engineer to speak next, please.
Through you, the chair, the watershed plan that we have here today is based on the original reports. So if Mr. Taylor's farm was in the branch 7, I believe, Shannon, of the Harley Drain in 1956 or when it was originally constructed, it's still there today. The land hasn't changed, and if it was agreed upon in 1956 or whenever that last report was done, then we've just incorporated into here. So unfortunately, that's what we have to work with. And I don't know, Shannon's just going to try to look up that original report to see whether that part of the property was there then. So
Thank
again,
you.
we're relying on the original reports for this information.
Thank
We're
you.
just updating them for maintenance.
Are there questions for the engineer? Councillor Miller?
Just, I'm just looking at the map. I don't have the list of all the properties involved in the percentages, but it would appear it would be a small piece anyway. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilor Miller, you are correct. It's a very small corner of the Taylor farm.
Of lot 19.
Yeah, part lot 19, concession 6.
Okay.
Looks like the southeast quadrant of that farm. Now, we should have an area within our assessment schedule to say what that was. I just may have to try to find it.
So we'll just stand by a moment to get that information.
we show it here in our maintenance schedule as 0.24 hectares. So 0.4 of a hectare is an acre. We're actually looking at half an acre of Mr. Taylor's farm that we assessed in this drain, or updated in this report.
Thank you. Any further questions from the court? All right, seeing none, we have heard all of the appeals at this point. So the court is going to withdraw to the side room to deliberate. So members of the public, I believe, are welcome to stand by in the room here. Yeah. And if anyone does need the washroom, it's just through the door here. Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. We are going to reconvene as the Court of Revision. All right, so the court did recess to the other room and we have arrived at our decisions. So I will read them out. So we are going to begin with the first appeal. That was Mr. Hughes. The court is dismissing the appeal as we accept the engineer's findings based on his professional experience. The assessed cost of $420 per property stands because all properties will equitably benefit from the report. With regards to the second appeal brought forward by Mr. Peters, this appeal is dismissed as all properties within the watershed are comparably affected by the data accuracy, and an adjustment would not materially impact the assessment cost. And we do want to make an informal note on that one as well, that staff are going to look at the data accuracy and the availability of the information, and they will let us know if they found something that was more significant, but also to make sure that future drainage reports are not affected by this same challenge. And then with regards to the third appeal brought forward by Mr. Taylor, it is to be dismissed as the property's inclusion in the watershed is confirmed in both the historic 1931, 1956, and 1974 reports, as well as the most recent report using LiDAR technology. Thank you. So with that, the court will stand down and everyone's free to go. Thank you.